Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So I'm coming to you. Oh, I gotta tell you this story first. Well, I'll tell you where I'm at. I am, not I'm at. I don't want to dangle any participles this early in the evening. I am at a Liberty gas station that has some truck parking. It's on 522, US 522. And if you ever take the shortcut on 522, that where you would get off of like I-70, or maybe when you get off of 68 in Hancock, Maryland, you head south, you go through Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, and then it dumps you out in Virginia. And just to give you an idea, if you head south from where I am, because I'm about, I think, 5 or 6 miles from the West Virginia line in Virginia. You head south, you'll end up in Winchester, and a lot of people use that as a shortcut to get down to 81, because you can get down there to Virginia 37, and it's like a little beltway around Winchester and dumps you out on 81 if you're headed south. And then if you just went straight, you would run into 81 pretty quickly, and you could go north or whatever, or you could go south too. And then if I went north, Berkeley Springs is like, I don't know, maybe like 18, 20 miles from here. But it's kind of this little place, and if you're flying through here, you might not even notice truck parking, because it's just looks like a regular gas station in the front, but there are diesel pumps out back, and there's probably, I mean, there's as much truck parking as you could fit trucks in here, but I think there's like there's probably 5 or 6 spots, and then you can make a spot. You could probably add another 3 or 4 make a spots. So anyway, so I was, so I got this little story about how being lazy paid off for me today. My 70-hour clock is low. Like right now I have 1 hour and 4 minutes left on my 70, but I already have started recapping. It's just at midnight, last night or early this morning, I only recapped like 4 hours and change. So I had about like 7 hours, less than 8 hours to work with today, but I was up in New York. I was in Bath, New York, like I was talking about. And I needed to get, come down to Winchester and then go find a place to park. But I could have left early, and I when I first did get on the road, I was kicking myself for not leaving early, because there was snow. And in fact, down in Pennsylvania, in certain parts of Pennsylvania, like around Altoona, Ebensburg, there was heavy snow. I hit going across 86 in New York, and then I turned south and headed down 15. There was snow for probably about 10 miles, and I was like, man, if this keeps up, I'm gonna just, because I knew I was supposed to quit in the middle of the morning. But anyway, so I was kind of kicking myself for not getting out of there earlier before the snow started. But it paid off, because when I got to Winchester, there were like a gazillion people with loads there waiting to check in and drop their trailers. And there were probably like maybe 10 guys from my company, and then another 4 or 5 from other companies that bring stuff from places we don't run. But the benefit to that was that I wasn't cutting into my 14-hour clock, because my 70 was the clock that was running my life today. But because I had to wait around so long for them to process all the people that were there ahead of me, I got detention pay. So it didn't hurt me to wait around for 3 hours, but I got paid for it. So it wasn't jamming up my schedule, because I wasn't going really any farther than I am right now. I just got here a little bit later, but it's okay, because I got to wait till at least midnight to get any meaningful time back. So it all works out fine. Yeah. So let me ask you this question though, and then I'll get to the meat of this broadcast, the meat of this show. When you see this sign, do you think like I think? So I think, yeah, I won't stay overnight. See, because overnight, like if you invited somebody special to your apartment or to your house with you, you met them somewhere at a bar, at a truck stop, whatever. You invite them to come overnight, but if they left at 02:23, you'd be like, I thought you were going to stay overnight with me. And they'd be like, yeah, that was my 10-hour break. See, I'm not staying overnight. I'm staying till it's going to be dark for many hours after I'm out of here in the morning. So I would never stay here overnight. I would not disobey them. I think I'm going to get home maybe Friday, definitely not later than Saturday because I got a birthday party to go to. But I am missing the family, especially our new additions. Take a look. Yeah, that's right. My wife's got some chicks. And so you may know that we have chickens. I think I've mentioned it before. And by the way, B, if you're wondering what B thinks of them, she doesn't think a thing. B only really ever concerned herself with other dogs and people, and then my mom's cat, but then eventually they came to a peaceful coexistence. Yeah, B pays no attention to the chicks. Like, she knows we have chickens in the, out back, but she doesn't think much of them. She doesn't worry about them. But anyway, yeah, so my wife bought some chicks, and if you're wondering how that works, they will get raised up until they're like basically adults, in a separate area from the hens that we have now. And because you can't just put chicks in with hens if those hens aren't their moms. So what'll happen is at some point we'll start integrating them outside, like in their little chicken run area, and then I think, and my wife's the chicken lady. She's the chicken mom expert person. But yeah, so you just can't say, oh yeah, let's just put all the little chicks in or whatever. You have to, I guess, socialize them. They have their rules. And if you mess up the rules, chickens can be extraordinarily cruel to other chickens. Like if a chicken gets sick, the other chickens will basically attack it and peck it to death because they're like, you're sick, you got to go. And so it's cruel. It's cruel barnyard reality. Speaking of cruel barnyard reality, so there's this person, and candidly, I don't know their name. I don't even know their gender, I don't think. But it wouldn't matter. They send me emails about things that go on. I have several people that talk to me about different companies and stuff like that. But I have one person in particular that's super familiar with Prime Flatbed. And I've talked about Prime Flatbed before and how, they kind of done some stupid things and things that hurt drivers. And I don't know if you recall, but there's this guy named Brian Brown, and he's head of Flatbed. But this particular person, and I'll just show you because I have my tablet up so I could read the email. I can get email on my phone, but since I'm using it to record, but I'll just show you that I got my tablet up. I'm not really going to show any other information, but I'm going to read this guy's email. And this is like the third in a series of emails that this person sent me. I say guy, because honestly, I don't know this person. But they know who I am, and maybe I've met them, I don't know. But But anyway, so this is the third in a series of emails. By the way, I'm wearing a Prime shirt to have solidarity with my brethren at Prime who do flatbed. Also, everybody else at Prime. They sent me this email. I keep saying he, but I don't know who it is. They sent me this email, and this is the third email that they have sent about essentially the same subject. So give you some background. Oh, and by the way, Brian Brown, you may remember, I've showed a picture of him before. Here's a picture. Oh wait, that's not him. Here's a picture of Brian Brown. They look alike. So Prime bought a company, and in one of the earlier emails, he told me the name of the company, but I can't remember it. But that doesn't really matter exactly. But what happened is they bought this trucking company, small trucking company, flatbed company in Oklahoma. And this company was, a mom and pop, I think. But they had a contract with American Gypsum, so drywall company. And American Gypsum had apparently said, rejected Prime's overtures to come in and get their business previous. But Prime ends up kind of backdooring their way in, which is not uncommon in the industry, right? Like, people buy other companies. Trucking companies buy other trucking companies, often for the contracts that they have. That's really what they want. And not uncommon in the industry. And then, it's up to the customer if they want to keep going with who they got, who bought the company. And I don't know if when Prime bought out that company, if they just brought their drivers over to Prime. I assume that they did, because it turns out this was a dedicated account. And a lot of guys, unlike probably the vast majority of Prime flatbedders, a lot of these guys on this account they just worked a normal, like 5, maybe 5.5 day week. They were home every weekend. It was a good gig, and they made decent money at it. So, but, there's a lot of people at Prime who are, I will just say, cocky assholes. And when I say at Prime, I mean in management. They think they're better than other trucking companies. They think they're smarter than everybody. They think their shit doesn't stink. They think that they know better than anybody else. And so what originally the information I was getting was that the American Gypsum contract was lost by Prime. And what Prime said to all these guys that were basically kind of like local-ish drivers, certainly dedicated, is, hey, you guys are going to have to go OTR. And these are guys that were home every weekend. And but I didn't know exactly why. He didn't know exactly why. But then he sent me this email, and I got this on Monday. And he says, and I'm going to read this verbatim, because I don't think there's any real information in here that's going to reveal his identity to Prime, certainly. He says, or they say, as I told you, Prime is done at American Gypsum. It appears the final nail in the coffin was a heated argument, and he puts that in quotes, that Brian Brown, head of Prime Flatbed Logistics, and Craig, I don't know if he failed to, it might be Loria or Ioria. He might have not capitalized the L. But Craig Loria, will say, the head of logistics at American Gypsum, an argument they got into. It was a screaming, this is a quote, it was a screaming match with one another, comma. Rumor has it that when the American Gypsum manager walked out from that argument, he said Prime lost this account due only to ego, greed, and an unwillingness to find common ground. And, going way back to when I had a meeting with Prime because of the Jason Pearson disappearance, because I had spoken out about it and crapped on some people about it. You know, I met with Stan Allman and my driver manager, and then this other guy named Jamie Ely, I think. And Stan Allman couldn't have been a bigger arrogant prick if he tried. Every single thing I said, he was contradicted me. But he wanted to tell me how, you know, people on YouTube were all negative, which is not true, which is just not true. Even me, I wasn't always negative about Prime. I've said a lot of things that I liked about Prime. I said a lot of good things about Prime, and I would even still advocate for people going to Prime. But this guy was just convinced that everybody on YouTube, he called me a shock jock one time, by the way. I was like, what am I, Howard Stern? But Steve Dahl. But anyway, and this guy, like I said, he couldn't have been a bigger arrogant prick. Like, he was so condescending, and just thought he was the superior being in the room. And the other two guys, Jamie Ely and my fleet manager James, man, they were just like, oh yeah, yes sir, yes. I mean, that's kind of how they were. It was like, oh, how long you been here at the company? How long you been? You know, but so it wouldn't surprise me that this Brian Brown guy that this is very accurate, given what I've seen from Prime managers in the past. Let me see if I can, oh, that's as far as that goes. Guess we'll have to deal with the sun a little bit. Anyway, oh, you know, I could just turn it. Yeah, duh. Okay, so let's continue on with this email. So he says, quote, on another note, Prime leased a warehouse on American Gypsum's property, and they're up in Oklahoma, where drivers could get out of the weather and tarp and secure, which I guess means the Prime drivers. And if it's, you know, they might have had a lot of the business or most of the business. And it also had a shower, restroom, refrigerator, etc. Brian Brown, still quoting here, Brian Brown told the local Prime employee who lives in the area, and they took care of making sure the facility was clean and repairs done. Then Brian Brown told this person, throw everything away and leave them nothing, and said, and this is a quote in the email, don't even leave them toilet paper, end quote. And then he says, that's all I know. Every single dedicated driver, this is again quote, every single dedicated driver except 2 have left. And he means Prime, like, because all these guys, you know, they were just living their best lives. They were working for a company, and, you know, they probably started out at that other trucking company. The funny thing is, that other trucking company, the people that ran it might start up a new trucking company and just get this business back. Anyway, you know, a lot of this rings true to me. And in part, for you know, I look at the totality of the information I get. This person has given me what I would call inside information repeatedly, and, you know, they've kind of backed up what they've said. But here, and here's the interesting thing, right? Like, I don't know what percentage of the revenue that Prime Flatbed has that they was generated from this American Gypsum account. But here's what I do know. In the world of customers and vendors, right? Customers and service providers, whatever you want to say, clients, professionals, whatever, you know, you can use that. There are lots of terms. But here's what I know. You can't keep business when you are a jackass. And I think that Brian Brown probably thinks, oh, this American Gypsum business, I'm not going to put up, they're small potatoes. I'm not going to put up with their crap. I'm prime. I'm prime time. I'm not going to put up with their crap. But here's what Brian Brown, because he lives in a frickin', fishbowl where everybody's kissing everybody's asses up the chain of command in frickin' Springfield, Missouri, right? It's a big town that's not really that big, And I don't think he realizes that this guy, Craig Eoria, but I think Loria, he might not always work at American Gypsum. He might go to work at a bigger company that maybe is 25% of Prime Flatbed's business. Because these guys move around. And I've seen it. I saw it in my previous industry. I remember, my law firm had an attorney network around the country that we set up. It was kind of proprietary. I mean, it wasn't like these people only worked for us, these other law firms. But what I learned is, like in the mortgage business, you could have somebody that handles vendor relations, and lawyers are vendors, right? And they could be at like mid-level, but hate a certain law firm or hate a certain group of people. And then they get promoted either within, or they move to another company where they take on a bigger role, and they have a say in which vendors get hired. And this guy is never going to forget, if even part of this is true, even if the term argument, the shouting match, whatever you want to call it, is kind of overemphasized, overdone, if it's just if it's hyperbole, this guy's still going to remember this Brian Brown guy. And because at Prime, your currency is how long you've been there and how much ass you kiss up the line, it's not going to matter. Brian Brown probably won't be going anywhere, but Mr. Craig might be going somewhere. And here's the other thing. Even if he's at the pinnacle and he's never going to leave American Gypsum, he still goes to all sorts of industry conferences. Like if he works for a building materials company, a supplier, they sell millions of tons of drywall to big contractors, like all these home builders, these subcontractors of, KB Homes and Horton and all these, Toll Brothers, all these big companies. They have relationships, and those companies will be like, hey, you're our subcontractor on drywall for 100 house development. We would like you to use American Gypsum products. So guess what? That sub calls American Gypsum and says, hey, I need 40 truckloads of drywall. It'll get done, right? They get a price, it just, that's how business works. And so when you burn a bridge like Brian Brown did, you don't know when that bridge might need to be crossed. You don't know who Craig Loria is going to talk to at an industry conference. You don't know who his friends are. You don't know who he went to college with or to business school with. Everybody talks all the time. And old Brian Brown sitting there in frickin' Springfield, Missouri, thinking he's wonderful and telling Robert Lowe how awesome Mr. Lowe is and what a great job the flatbed division's doing. He doesn't realize that as he's saying all that, as he's down there playing pickleball or laughing at dumb jokes that are told at the pep rally on Friday, that there are forces at work that are destroying his business, and he doesn't even get it. And even if somebody was going to break off a relationship, to do it in this way just shows a monumental amount of arrogance and stupidity and just not being able to read a room, not really understanding how business is done. And so I'm sure Steve Watke is not happy about it, because I'm guessing somebody in sales has to go out and try to develop relationships and keep drivers moving. The funny thing is, I read in Freight Waves today that the flatbed market is really doing pretty well. But there's no such thing unless you're just absolutely taking a bath on a client, where every time you do something for that client, you lose money. Unless that's the case, and even if it was, you might say, hey, look, we need to get better pricing. Is there something you can do? And if they say no, say, okay, well, we appreciate the relationship. We appreciate that we've been able to work with you, but we can't really commit to more. We can't continue to do this because we're not making, our margins are too tiny to justify this account for us right now. But we still are always interested in your business. But when you burn a bridge and piss off somebody, because then it's not a business decision. Then it just starts to feel personal. And here's the thing, Brian Brown doesn't give a crap if, those drivers go to other companies and they're not working at Prime anymore, right? Like, he's not losing any sleep over it, because he doesn't care. But he's also screwing, because this has a ripple effect, and he's not just screwing over those guys that were on that dedicated account that counted on that. He's screwing over other drivers, because here's the thing. There's a finite amount of business. When you give up any business, when it's an unforced error, because it doesn't sound like American Gypsum was like, oh, hey, you had 7 trucks go in ditches in 1 week, and, we just can't accept that. That wasn't what was going on. It was some ego thing with Prime. And I've seen it before, but I don't get it, and it's really not fair to Prime flatbed drivers, because when the company you work for, the division that you work for, has a reputation of being a bunch of assholes, the management has a reputation for being an asshole. It doesn't matter how great a driver you are, how careful you are with the cargo you carry. It's not going to matter. Your company's going to lose the business. And, like I said, these industries, they have conferences. I remember one time I was at a mortgage servicing conference in Orlando, and it was all these people in the servicing, default servicing, stuff like that. But it just so happened that I noticed that there were a lot of other people, and it was a building products. I think it was like the Siding Association. And there were all these people that, weren't lawyers, like you could just tell how they were dressed. They were dressed, I'll call it business construction, like they had a button-down shirt on, but they had on chinos and boots that you could actually get dirty. They didn't have like $400 dress shoes on. I knew they weren't lawyers. They were there for their conference, right? That's what goes on in every industry. And anyway, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I appreciate the information. And it's important that as drivers, we understand the economics behind what we do. I pay very close attention to the contract that my company's on that I run, because I know we got the contract, or we got the business, because somebody else wasn't getting the job done the way the customer wanted. So anyway, and by the way, man, I had a lot of comments when I talked about Truck Stops of America. So I appreciate everybody's comments and insights. And I don't think there's maybe like one person out of all the people that comment that was like, oh, that's a nice TA. And there are some, like I said, but the vast majority, it's like, oh, this one's a crap hole. This one's a crap hole. So I don't think I was too far off the mark on what I was saying. But anyway, if you're Prime flatbed, hit me up. My email, chieftransporters@gmail. And I'll leave it in the description section. I'm just interested in this because it's an interesting dynamic to me, how company and really this is also, I mean, again, not to beat a dead horse, but stuff like this becomes the seed that's the start of the growth of a Harvard Business School case study or a business school's case study. Like, you know, because anybody been to Sears lately? I haven't, but when I was a kid, there was a Sears everywhere. There's no company that can't fail. There's no company that can't fail. And how the failure, the chain of events that cause a company's ultimate demise it starts with stuff like this. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.